The mitzvah of lighting Shabbos candles, ushering in the holiest day of the week, is as old as the Jewish people. Of course, the Jewish people began with Avraham and Sarah, our first patriarch and our first matriarch. So it's been 4,000 years. 4,000 years of Jewish women lighting the Shabbos candles. So to understand and appreciate this mitzvah, we need to examine a few things. First of all, what is a mitzvah? Secondly, what is the meaning of a candle, of a flame? And what is the significance of the fact that this mitzvah began before it was commanded? There was no commandment to light Shabbos candles, but Sarah lit the candles anyway. So let's begin with mitzvah. The word mitzvah means connection. Of course, it means instruction or command, but that's only the technical side of it. The deeper side of it is that it creates a connection, a merging, a joining. Very sophisticated human being is compared or distinguished from the most simple of people. The distance between them is unbridgeable. They don't exist in the same universe. The person who lives with education, with knowledge, with noble ideas and ideals, lives in a universe that is very different from the peasant. Completely different reality, completely different universe. There's no other way to describe it. And so, for all practical purposes, they don't exist for each other. But if this very sophisticated, noble, highly intellectual person needs a favor, and the simple person can do that favor for him, two things happen. Number one, the simple person comes into existence in the universe of the sophisticated person. And number two, the sophisticated person becomes real in the life and in the universe of the simple person. Their universes have come together. Now, to the extent that the noble person is greater and the simple person is more simple, the greater the distance, the greater the pleasure. The greater the distance that is overcome by this mutual recognition, the greater the pleasure. So when we think about God compared to or distinguished from the human being, the distance is so awesome that when it's overcome, because God asks us for a favor, the pleasure that comes from that is infinite, both for God and for the human being. By doing a mitzvah, we enter into God's universe, where we really have no business and no rights to trespass. But when we're invited, because there is something we can do for him, that is the real meaning of mitzvah. The joining, the coming together, the bridging of the distance. For the simple person, the thought that he can do something for somebody so great does more than just connect him to the greater person. It gives his entire being and his entire existence a whole new quality. He doesn't become the sophisticate. He doesn't become the genius. He doesn't become the noble person. He has no aspirations. He has no complex, no illusions of grandeur. He knows who he is, and he remains simple. And yet, as simple as he is, he can do something that is meaningful, not to him and not in his world, but meaningful in a world that he previously could not even imagine. There is this dynamic, of course, of the attraction of opposites. The higher a person is, the more simple are his pleasures. Let me put that in different words. It is so common that the greatest of kings related best to the most simple of people. Now, you would think a king would get along best with another king. They would understand each other, they speak the same language, they have the same issues, they're equally powerful. They should get along fabulously. Of course they don't. Then you would think that the king gets along best with his ministers, those who understand the workings of the palace and the workings of the politics. But that doesn't happen either. It turns out that the only person the king is comfortable with and relaxed in their presence and in their company are the most simple, the most artless. Why is that? Because the king is of an essence that nobody else can share. A minister, even the greatest of ministers, doesn't even get close to the authority, the power, the majesty of a king. They have nothing in common. The king is the king, and the minister is the subject. He may be more talented than the other subjects, but to the king, he's just another citizen. The simplest of people have something in common with that unique quality of the king. The king is essential, indivisible, head and shoulders above the rest. And therefore, it's lonely at the top. Being at the bottom is equally lonely. And that's how they understand each other. With God, God is a completely independent, unique existence. Nobody created him, nobody owns him, nobody can tell him what to do. Who is most similar to that? A simple person who thinks he created himself and that nobody can tell him what to do. But when this person discovers that God really is independent and there really is no force or no power that can tell him what to do, the simple person is not only in awe of God, but is sympathetic. He can imagine what that feels like, because he once thought that he was God in his simplicity. I am what I am, and that's all what I am, and that just the very fact that he has no noble qualities leaves him feeling as an essential being with no ties to anyone or to anything. Of course, that's only the way he feels. With God, it is actually true. So the higher something is, the more alone you are because of how high you are, the better you can relate to someone who is all alone because of how low they are. They've got something in common, and that is simplicity. So when you do a mitzvah, your simplicity joins, merges with God's simplicity, and you become truly one. All of this, of course, is on the assumption that the mitzvah that God asks you to do is essential to him. And how else could it be? How would we even imagine God asking something that is not essential? Everything about God is essential. Of the essence. So when God asks us to do a mitzvah, it's coming from his essence. It's not a frivolous, unnecessary, and insignificant request. God doesn't bother with insignificant. In God's world, there is nothing insignificant. So the mitzvah that he asks us to keep, like the mitzvah of Shabbos, is essential to him. And that's why if we can keep Shabbos for him, we are fulfilling an essential need, not some secondary or insignificant detail. And in the example of a king, it might be trivial. The king needs somebody to groom his horse. Not exactly the most intimate of his needs, but with God, everything is intimate. Everything is essential. Certainly the mitzvah that he asks is essential to him. So when we do the mitzvah, we really enter into the essential reality of God's universe, of God's being. Now, let's take that up a step. What would it mean to do a mitzvah beyond the letter of the law? More than God required. That's a pretty amazing idea. What God requires is absolutely essential, meaning it can't be any other way. It's non-negotiable. Then what could be more powerful, what could be more essential than the mitzvah that God asks for? And yet we're told that if you go beyond the letter of the law, well, then you're a chassid, which is greater than a tzaddik. But what is beyond the letter of the law? The law is the mitzvah, the commandment. And the commandment is essential to the commander. And that's why when we do the mitzvah, we become connected to the essence of God. Not something God-like, but to God. So what could be greater than that? So what is beyond the letter of the law? And this pertains to lighting the Shabbos candles, because Jewish women lit Shabbos candles before God asked for it. It was initiated by the Jew, not by God, which makes it special, like beyond the letter of the law. But what is that? What is beyond the letter of the law? Well, you can do a mitzvah out of a sense of duty, obedience. If God asks, you got to do it. If God commands, well, what choice do you have? You got to do it. So why do you do the mitzvah? Well, you're commanded. And you take commandments seriously. If this is what is demanded of me, if this is what is expected of me, how can I not? On top of that, look who is asking. Look who is commanding this. God himself, my Father in heaven, the creator of the world. So the motivation for doing the mitzvah is at the very least shared. I'm doing it because of God, but I'm also doing it because it's commanded. Going beyond the letter of the law means I am motivated by only one thing, and that is God. So that even if I'm not commanded, anything that will bring me closer to God, I will do before I'm asked to do it. Now, imagine which is more precious to God. A person who does what he is told to do once he is commanded, or the person who does something before he's commanded out of a desire to get closer to God. Or to put it in more crass terms, fulfilling a commandment brings reward. You get to heaven, you get blessings, you live long, whatever it is. Going beyond the letter of the law means you have no interest in the reward. If it's not commanded, then no reward is promised. And you don't care, because you're not thinking of a reward. You're thinking of who you're connecting to. That's beyond the letter of the law. So now we know what it means to do a mitzvah. We also know what it means to do it without being told. Let's put it in different terms. When God gives us a mitzvah, he is initiating the relationship. He's coming to us saying, here's what I need from you. When a Jew initiates, when you do something beyond the letter of the law, when Sarah, our matriarch, lit Shabbos candles without being asked to do it, she was initiating the relationship. There's a great pleasure that God has when he initiates the relationship and we respond properly. God said, I have commandments. Are you interested? And we responded properly. We said, absolutely, we will do it before asking what it is we're going to do. Very appropriate answer. Gave God a lot of pleasure. But there's another kind of pleasure where God hadn't asked at all. But the desire of a Jewish soul to get closer to God moved her, Sarah, to start lighting Shabbos candles. When you take the initiative in your desire to get closer to God, that's a whole different kind of pleasure. When you have both, you've got the best of both worlds. Now let's take a look at what the candle is all about. We're told concerning the mitzvah of lighting Shabbos candles, the function of the candle, unlike the candle of the Hanukkah menorah, the candle in the menorah is mystical. You're not allowed to use the light of the menorah candle to read by or to sew by. It's a holy light for God's pleasure, not ours. The Shabbos candle, on the other hand, is in order to have light in the house so that you don't stumble or trip over things, so that you can see where you're going. Now, of course, you have to have a candle in the house every night. When that's your only source of light, like it was back then you need it every night. What is it with the Shabbos candle that makes it different than the candle you lit Wednesday night? It also gave light so that you didn't trip on things. Your house was bright. You could see what's in front of you. Why is the Friday night candles different? Here's the beauty of it. On Shabbos, the world is different. The created world is different on Shabbos than it is the day before, the hour before. Something changes in the universe because something is changing in the creation. For 6 days of the week, God creates the world through speech. And God said, let there be, and there was. So how do things get created? Through speech. God's words, the letters that God uses in describing creation. That's what gives life to the creation. Words are audible. The letters, the Hebrew letters, that make up the word are visible. We know how to form those letters. We can identify the aleph from the bet. So the voice is audible, the letters are visible. That's why the world created through speech is mundane. But on Shabbos, God does not create the world with speech. And that's what it means that God created the world in 6 days and on the seventh he rested. He rested from what? from using words. On the seventh day of creation, God did not say anything. And yet he created the world on that day too. Because if he didn't create the world, there would be no world. So God creates the world continuously during the 6 days of the week through speech and letters. And on the seventh day of every week, God creates the world through thought. He thinks it into existence. Because the world and all its details are in God's mind, that's what causes it to exist. But that which is produced by thought is more refined, more delicate, closer to God than that which is the product of his speech. Because speech is not as close to the speaker as thought is to the thinker. So when God is thinking the world into existence, it's a whole different world. You might say it's a more thoughtful universe. It's permeated with God's thought, whereas during the week, the universe is permeated with God's word. Now that difference is not always visible. There was a famous holy man who, as a child, could not understand the discussion in the Gemara, in the Talmud, where they're debating what to do when you don't have a calendar and you don't know what day is Shabbos. You don't know what day of the week it is. What do? It might be Shabbos today. So there's a discussion about how to go about that. What do you do if you don't know whether it's Shabbos today? Like you're stranded on an island. And this holy man, when he was a little boy, told the teacher that he doesn't understand this conversation. And the teacher said, what don't you understand? He says, I don't understand. How can you not know when it's Shabbos? Shabbos is different. You don't need a calendar. Of course, that's because he was born holy. So to him, the world looked different on Shabbos than it did during the week. But for most people, the difference is not so visible. So Sarah, our matriarch, our grandmother, came along and said, in order to appreciate Shabbos, in order to introduce Shabbos, to bring Shabbos into the home, you have to light a candle. The purpose of this candle is to enable us to see the difference, to see the unseeable. For the non-tzaddik, it's unseeable. By lighting a Shabbos candle, you make the change in the universe a little more visible. So every night, when it gets dark, you light a candle because you want to see where the chair is so that you don't trip over it. Friday night, you light a candle so that you can see how the chair is different tonight than it was the night before. You can see how the table or the chair or whatever it is, you can see how it is Shabbosdik. Something magical happens in every Jewish home. We take it for granted because we're used to it. But it's magical. The day is hectic. It's Friday. You're getting ready for Shabbos. The family is all in chaos. Where are my shoes? Where's the shoe polish? Where's my hat? What got done? Who did you buy everything? Did you bring everything? Did you cook everything? Mad rush. And then the moment comes. And you light the Shabbos candle. all of a sudden, magically, there's nothing more to do, no rush, no tumult, no chaos. Everything's fine. It's Shabbos. Yeah, you can say I forgot to make the kugel, but that's it. Forgot is forgot. No more anxiety about that. That's the power of the Shabbos candle. All of a sudden, everything is good. It's not just that I can see the chair. It's a Shabbos-dik chair. It's not just that I can see the food. It's Shabbos-dik food. This is now being created in God's thought. He's thinking of the world. That's like harmony in the home. When husband and wife are truly on the same page, things can get done and nobody has to say anything. It doesn't need to be said. And yet it happens. So that's the beauty and the power of the mitzvah, of going beyond the letter of the law, and the significance of the light. If you want to get a little more mystical about it, the flame of the candle is the only entity in the universe, because the soul always wants to go up. It always wants to get closer to God, not closer to creation. The body is made of dust and will return to dust. In other words, it is drawn to earth, to earthy things. The spiritual form of gravity. But the soul has no such tendency. It is not attracted to earth at all. Its only interest is in that which is above, heavenly concerns. And so it always reaches upwards to the point where it actually wants to leave the wick and extinguish itself and just disappear into heaven, like the soul. So by lighting the Shabbos candle, we're giving a physical expression to the longing that the soul has on Shabbos that is more intense than it is during the week. On kind of a negative note, we know that during holiday times, people get into more trouble, they get hurt more, they get depressed more. Why is that? Well, partly because there's no work to keep them distracted. When we have free time, we sometimes get into trouble. We're not really good at handling free time. And that's okay, because that keeps us engaged, keeps us productive. We work, we do things, we fix the world, we improve the world, we harness nature, make the world better. But when we're not engaged in that work, we could get into trouble, could become depressed. But Shabbos for the Jew is not like that. Shabbos is not simply a time of non-productivity. That wouldn't justify itself. Shabbos, we get to experience our soul more than our body. And so we have an extra slice of soul. Our soul is closer and more accessible to us on Shabbos. So we celebrate it by elevating all we do to match the nobility of that soul. So we don't engage in menial tasks. It's inappropriate for the higher level of our soul. And that is represented by the candle. One final thought. When a Jewish girl today lights the Shabbos candle, she's doing two things that are diametrically opposed and opposite. On the one hand, she is doing something so familiar, something so Jewish, so traditional. She's doing the same thing her mother did and her grandmother, and all the way back to Sarah. And if there was a generation or two that skipped, it's still awesome. A chain 4,000 years old, virtually unbroken. So when a girl today lights a Shabbos candle, she is stepping right into the shoes of our matriarch, Sarah. There's something very powerful about that. An unbroken chain. An act that is so well established over all of time in every place that Jews ever were, and we've been everywhere. Shabbos candle. The New York Times, I don't know why or exactly when this was, a couple of years ago, they made a mock-up of a cover, front page, New York Times, 30 years from now. What is the news going to be 30 years from now? So they put together an imaginary front page. At the bottom, in the corner, it said candle lighting time this week will be at 7:24. I'm just picking a number. And they asked the writers, what was that for? We put an ad into the paper announcing candle lighting time for each week. But why would the New York Times choose to put that on the page from all the possible? And their answer was, that's the only part we know for sure is still going to be here 30 years from now. Everything else is speculation. Yes, 30 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, Friday night, Jewish women are going to light Shabbos candles. And how far back does that go? As far back as there were Jews. So that's pretty awesome. On the other hand, the mitzvah you're performing, a girl in 21st century America, or wherever, but in this century, in this millennium, the sixth millennium, with all of the circumstances, conditions, and so on, no one ever did this mitzvah the way the girl today is doing this mitzvah. It is totally unique, unprecedented. Never happened before. What never happened? No one with this temperament, with this set of experiences, with this set of parents, with this set of circumstances, no one like this girl ever lit a Shabbos candle. Many Shabbos candles were lit, not like this one. This is completely unique, which means that no mitzvah is a repetition of any other mitzvah. None, ever. Because even the same girl who lights the Shabbos candle the next week, well, it's a week later, stuff has happened. Either she's more inspired because of all the good stuff that happened that week, or she's a little less inspired because of all the difficult things that happened that week. It's not the same as last week. So every time a Jew lights a Shabbos candle, it's unique. And every time the same Jew lights a Shabbos candle, it's unique. Who notices this? Obviously, the Creator, who notices everything and cares about everything. He is the master of the universe, means every detail of the universe matters to him. So whether you're lighting the Shabbos candle with inspiration, without inspiration, with joy, with sadness, with awe, with love, it all matters to him, and he notices it all. The accumulated light of all the Shabbos candles, of all of history, is a very powerful influence on the universe. It plays a great part in the preparing of the world for Mashiach, when the world will be filled with light, when godliness will be visible because of that light. Shabbos candle lets you see the holiness of Shabbos. It illuminates the Shabbos. Illuminates means makes it visible. So next time you light your Shabbos candle, get excited. It is something magnificent. And to God, the fact that a Jewish woman initiated this mitzvah, of course, God adopted it and said, yeah, this is a mitzvah. I love this. But it was started by Sarah. That makes it special, even in God's eyes. So thank you for listening. We need to really get into and appreciate the various mitzvahs that we do, maybe even take for granted because we've been doing it for so long. But when we stop and think about it, it's pretty awesome. Pretty magnificent. Shalom Aleichem. How are you? You know, I do a lot of talking, a lot of Zooming, many classes, many subjects, but that's all formal stuff. Hopefully good stuff, but formal. We also have a Wednesday night meeting that's more informal and kind of Hamish. If you want to join us for that kind of an event, interactive, time for questions and so on. If you want to join us for this side of conversation, click on the link below and join us every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock. Well, maybe not every Wednesday night, but we try to make it every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock, a more informal chat, which can be more enjoyable at times than the formal stuff. So check it out. Click on the link and join us. Try it. You'll like it.